Hello, just a quick tutorial today. I'm going to show you how to create normal maps. And in order to understand why you would want to create a normal map, you probably need to know a little bit about what a normal map is. So a normal map is an image that it's an RGB image, just like a bitmap or a JPEG or a PNG that we use for a texture map. But instead of visual color information or diffuse information, it contains a normal slope, for lack of a better word, for each pixel, direction, basically. And if we look at our default cube here, we tab into edit mode, and we go into where we can see the normals. You can see these little blue guys sticking out of it. That's showing us where the normals of those faces are pointed. A normal map allows us to have that sort of directional information for every single pixel of the image that we map on there. So that's what a normal map does. The upshot is that you can fake high resolution details on low resolution geometry. So today I'm going to show you how to bake a normal map. Let's turn those normals back off. And in order to do that, what we're going to do is we'll delete our default cube here, and we'll just add a UV sphere because that's going to be pretty easy to demonstrate with. So this is a higher resolution object than our cube. Our cube only had 6 vertices, whereas this sphere has a lot more than that, but it still doesn't have enough resolution to really carry a lot of detail. For instance, if we wanted to put a face on this or make it into a golden snitch or something like that. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to duplicate this sphere so that we have 2 of them over here in our outliner, but I'm going to hit escape before I reposition the sphere, because I want that sphere exactly the same position as the original. I want them to be the same size. So I'm going to rename these sphere.low-poly and sphere.high-poly. And basically these spheres are going to be exactly what they sound like. So I have the high-poly sphere selected here. I'm going to hide the low-poly sphere, tab into edit mode on my high poly sphere, and I'm going to subdivide it so that I can sculpt a lot more detail into this thing. And 10 subdivisions ought to do enough for our demonstration here. So this is now a much higher resolution object than our low poly sphere. So let's go into our sculpting mode here, and we can just kind of sculpt in some details, and they don't have to be anything too fancy here. We'll sculpt in some creases. Maybe a nice sort of wavy line over here. That's kind of nice. And maybe we'll inflate. I'll change my, let's see, oh, here we go. My stroke method to an airbrush here so that I can just kind of inflate a bunch of spots over here on the side of the ball. Okay, so that's pretty good. And this ought to demonstrate a couple of things for us as well. A normal map, because it's kind of like a bump map in that it's faking geometry that's not really there. A normal map is not going to change the profile or the silhouette of our object. It won't actually displace geometry. But it will make the geometry look like highlights and shadows fall across it the same way. So here's our high resolution sphere, and I think we're ready to make a normal map with it. So I'm going to go back out of our sculpting workspace, and now I need to work with the low poly sphere. In order to bake a normal map into it, it has to have kind of a canvas or a receptacle basically to receive that normal map. So let's go to our shading menu here, and we'll add a new material. And this material, it doesn't really matter what color it is, so I happen to be really partial to kind of a Fujifilm green. So we'll make it a green color. Oops. And apparently I wasn't actually working with the sphere. There we go. So we'll make it a green color, and now I'm going to add under vector. You see we've got a normal map node there, so we'll plug that in. And then we need an image texture. We don't really have one. I mean, we're here to create one, right? That doesn't necessarily follow that we have to have it before we put the node in. So I'm going to go to my texture and image texture node down here and plug the color output into the color input on my normal map node. Okay, so now we're ready to feed normal map information into this material, but we just don't have that information yet. So over here where I have this just image editor or image editor node, I'm going to create a new image, and this is just going to be a blank image. We'll call this sphere-normal map, and I'll give it enough resolution that it can preserve the amount of detail that I want. So in this case, I'll just do a 2K image. That'll probably be fine. Generated type is going to be blank. It doesn't really matter for our purposes right now, so I'm going to click OK. And you can see over here I now just have a black canvas. I have one more step that I need to check. This is super important. I need to make sure that my sphere is UV unwrapped. So I can see that it is when I go into UV editing. It's unwrapped over here, and I can even see how it would overlay over my sphere normal map image, and that looks like a good overlay to me. It's taking up taking up almost all of the free space, so that's good. That's going to be a good fit. You'll have to make sure, if you're going to bake like this, you have to make sure that your object that receives the normal map is unwrapped. So let's go back to our layout. We're ready to bake. So over here in my render settings, I'm going to go to the Cycles Render Engine, and then I'm going to come down here to my Bake drop down. And when it says Bake Type instead of Combined, I'm just going to choose Normal. And then I'm going to check this box that says Selected to Active. And basically what that's going to allow me to do is take the sculpted information from my selected object from a selected object to the active selected object. And if you're wondering in Blender what the active selected object means, it's this. If I have two objects selected, like this camera and this sphere, one of them will be kind of a lighter bright orange, and one of them is a more of a red orange. The brighter orange is the active object. So even when I have multiple objects selected, there's a difference. One of them is active. So selected to active right now would, if it would work, would transfer information from this selected sphere to the selected and active camera. So I need to watch for that coloration. So I'm going to turn my Hi-Poly sphere back on, and we'll select the low poly sphere in the outliner, so it's our active object, and then shift click to select the high poly sphere. You can see over here the colors are indicating the same thing. The lighter orange is my active object, so that's the low poly, and that's what's going to receive the normal data. So the output is going to be an image texture. That's what I want, and I'm going to twirl down some options here. I'm going to check cage, and I'm going to change my max ray distance to about 0.1. And sometimes I have to play around with that distance a little bit to get the best results. I might have to play with it here, but I've found that leaving it at 0 generally doesn't produce anything. So I'm actually ready to bake now, but just so that you can kind of see what's going on, I'm going to split out my window, open an image editor, and open our sphere normal map image so we can see the difference that it makes as it bakes. So now I just hit my bake button, and then it will have to, oh, you know what? I made a mistake. So let's go back to shading. You might have noticed it said no active image down there. I haven't selected an image to be my normal map. So I've got this image texture node here, and I need to select my sphere normal map blank canvas that I created. One other thing that's really important, a normal map works a lot better if for the color space, instead of sRGB, you choose non-color. The non-color data, it tends to give a lot better results. And I don't actually know why. I'm sure somebody can chime in the comments and tell me, but that's something I've never found out. So now I'm ready to bake, and you'll see it complains about a circular dependency, but for some reason it complains about that every time, and it still works. Okay. That seems to have gotten our indents, but not our protrusions. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into this cage extrusion parameter here, and I'm going to put that in, and then I'm going to rebake, and you'll see that that got our extrusions there. Okay, so we are now ready to use this. At this point we could actually delete our Hi-Poly mesh, but in this instance I'm just going to turn it off, and let's actually just look at a rendered view of our simple sphere. You can see that our details are now placed there. Let's shade it smooth, and that's kind of nice, but it doesn't affect the profile. What you're seeing there is just kind of roughness in the turns of the sphere. But that's how you make a normal map. One last note is you need to make sure, if you've got this little star in your image menu, either under shading, image has a star there, or anywhere else that you've got an image editor open, you need to make sure that you save your image at this point, because if you close Blender without saving that, it disappears. Your normal map is just in memory right now, it's not in storage on the hard drive. Anyway, that's how you make a normal map. I hope that's helpful, and have a great day.